Lucy. I'm going to be reading Chewing Gum. I'm reading a little bit of the chapter called the Battle of Hogwarts from Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. Can you see that? Let's just come. The enchanted ceiling of the great hall was dark and scattered with stars, and below it the 4 long house tables were lined with dishevelled students, some in travelling cloaks, others in dressing gowns. Here and there shone the pearly white figures of the school ghosts. Every eye, living and dead, was fixed upon Professor McGonagall. He was speaking from the raised platform at the top of the hall. Behind her stood the remaining teachers, including the Palomino Centaur, Firenze, or something like that, and the members of the Order of the Phoenix who had arrived to fight. Evacuation will be overseen by Mr. Filch and Madame Pomfrey. Prefects, when I give the word, you will organise your house and take your charges in an orderly fashion to the evacuation point. Many of the students looked petrified. However, as Harry striked the walls, scanning the Gryffindor table for Ron and Hermione, only Macmillan stood up at the Hufflepuff table and shouted, "And what if we want to stay and fight?" There was a smattering of applause. "If you are of age, you may stay," said Professor McGonagall. "What about our things?" called a girl in the Ravenclaw table. "Our trunks, our owls." "We have no time to collect possessions," said Professor McGonagall. "The important thing is to get you out of here safely." "Where's Professor Snape?" shouted a girl from the Slytherin table. "He has, to use the common phrase, done a bunk," replied Professor McGonagall, and a great cheer erupted from the Gryffindors, Hufflepuffs and Ravenclaws. Harry moved up the hall alongside the Gryffindor table, still looking for Ron and Hermione. As he passed, faces turned in his direction, and a great deal of whispering broke out in his wake. "We had already placed protection around the castle," Professor McGonagall was saying, "but it is unlikely to hold for very long unless we reinforce it. I must ask you, therefore, to move quickly and calmly and do as your prefects." But her final words were drowned as a different voice echoed throughout the hall. It was high, cold and clear. There was no telling from where it came. It seemed to issue from the walls themselves, like the monster it had once commanded. It might have lain dormant there for centuries. "I know that you are preparing to fight." There were screams amongst the students, some of whom clutched each other, looking around in terror for the source of the sound. "Your efforts are futile. You cannot fight me. I do not want to kill you. I have great respect for the teachers of Hogwarts. I do not want to spill magical blood." There was silence in the hall now, the kind of silence that presses against the eardrums, that seems too huge to be contained by walls. "Give me Harry Potter," said Voldemort's voice, "and none shall be harmed. Give me Harry Potter, and I shall leave the school untouched. Give me Harry Potter, and you will be rewarded. You have until midnight." Silence swallowed them again. Every head turned, every eye in the place seemed to have found Harry, to hold him frozen in the glare of thousands of invisible beams. And a figure rose from the Slytherin table, and he recognised Pansy Parkinson, as she raised a shaking arm and screamed, "But he's there! Potter's there! Someone grab him!" Before Harry could speak, there was a massive movement. The Gryffindors in front of him had risen and stood facing, not Harry, but the Slytherins, and the Hufflepuffs stood, and almost at the same moment the Ravenclaws, all of them with their backs to Harry, one of them looking towards Pansy instead, and Harry, awestruck and overwhelmed, saw wands emerging everywhere, pulled from beneath cloaks and from under sleeves. "Thank you, Miss Parkinson," said Professor McGonagall in her clipped voice. "You will leave the hall first with Mr. Filch, if the rest of your house could follow." Harry heard the grinding of benches and then the sound of Slytherins trooping out on the other side of the hall. "Ravenclaws, follow on," cried McGonagall. Slowly the floor table was emptied. The Slytherin table was completely deserted, but a number of other Ravenclaws remained seated with their fellows filed out. Even more Hufflepuffs stayed behind. The Hall of Gryffindor remained in their seats, necessitating Professor McGonagall's descent from the teacher's platform to chivvy the underage on their way. "Absolutely not, Creevy. Go, and you, Peaks." Harry hurried over to the Weasleys, all sitting together at the Gryffindor table. "Where are Ron and Hermione?" "Haven't you found—" began Mr. Weasley, looking worried, but he broke off as Kingsley had stepped forward the raised platform to address those who had remained behind. "We've only got half an hour until midnight, so we need to act fast. A battle plan has been agreed between the teachers of Hogwarts and the Order of the Phoenix, Professors Flitwick, Sprout and McGonagall are going to take groups of fighters up to the 3 highest towers, Ravenclaw, Astronomy and Gryffindor, where they'll have a good overview, excellent positions for which to work spells. Meanwhile, Remus," he indicated Lupin, Arthur, he pointed towards Mr. Weasley, sitting at the Gryffindor table, "and I will take groups into the grounds. We need somebody to organise defence for the entrances of the passageways into the school." "Sounds like a job for us," called Fred, indicating himself, and George Kingsley nodded his approval. "All right, lead us up here and we'll divide up the troops. Potter," said Professor McGonagall, hurrying up to him, as students flooded the platform, jostling for position, receiving instructions. "Aren't you supposed to be looking for something?" "Wait, what? Oh," said Harry. "Oh, yeah." He had almost forgotten about the horcrux, almost forgotten that the battle was being fought so that he could search for it. The inexplicable absence of Ron and Hermione had momentarily driven every other thought from his mind. "Then go, Potter, go." "Right. Yeah." He sensed eyes following him as he ran out of the great hall, again into the entrance hall, still crowded with evacuating students. He allowed himself to be swept up the marble staircase with them. At the top he hurried off along a deserted corridor. Fear and panic were clouding his thought processes. He tried to calm himself, to concentrate on finding the horcrux, but his thoughts buzzed as frantically and fruitlessly as wasps trapped beneath a glass. Without Ron and Hermione to help him, he could not seem to marshal his ideas. He slowed down, coming to a halt, halfway along an empty passage, where he sat down upon the plinth of a departed statue and pulled the Modrus map out of the pouch around his neck. He could not see Ron or Hermione's names anywhere on it, and the density of the crowd of dots now making its way to the room of requirement might, he thought, be concealing them. He put the map away, pressed his hands over his face and closed his eyes, trying to concentrate. Voldemort thought I'd go to the Ravenclaw Tower. There it was, a solid fact, the place to start. Voldemort had stationed Aliceta Caro in the Ravenclaw common room, and there could only be one explanation. Voldemort feared that Harry already knew his horcrux was connected to that house, but the only object anyone seemed to associate with Ravenclaw was the lost diadem. And how could the horcrux be the diadem? How was it possible that Voldemort, the Slytherin, had found the diadem, that loaded generations of Ravenclaws, who could have told him where to look, when nobody had seen the diadem in living memory? in living memory. Beneath his fingers, Harry's eyes flew open again. He leapt up from the plinth and tore back the way he had come, now in pursuit of his own last hope. The sound of hundreds of people marching towards the room of requirement grew louder and louder as he returned to the marble stairs. Prefects were shouting instructions, trying to keep track of the students in their own houses. There was much pushing and shoving. Harry saw Zacharias Smith bowling over first years to get to the front of the queue. Here and there, younger students were in tears, while older ones called desperately for friends or for siblings. Harry caught sight of a pearly white figure drifting across the entrance hall below, and yelled as loud as he could over the clamour. "Nick! Nick! Nick! I need your help. I need to talk to you." He forced his way back through the tide of students, finally reaching the bottom of the stairs, when nearly headless Nick, ghost of Gryffindor Tower, stood waiting for him. "Harry, my dear boy!" Nick made to grasp Harry's hands. Both his own, Harry's felt as though he had been thrust into icy water. "Nick, you've got to help me. Who's the ghost of Ravenclaw Tower?" Nearly headless Nick looked surprised and a little offended. "The Grey Lady, of course, but if it is ghostly services you require, oh, it's got to be her. Do you know where she is?" "Let's see." Nick's head wobbled a little on his ruff and he turned hither and thither, peering over the heads of swarming students. "That's her over there, Harry. The young woman with the long hair." Harry looked in the direction of Nick's transparent pointing finger and saw a tall ghost who had caught sight of Harry looking at her, raised her eyebrows and drifted away through a solid wall. Harry ran after her. Once through the door of the corridor into which she had disappeared, he saw her at the very end of the passage, still gliding smoothly away from him. "Hey, wait, come back." She consented to pause, floating a few inches from the ground. Harry supposed that she was beautiful with her waist-length hair and floor-length cloak, but she also looked haughty and proud. Close to, he recognised her as a ghost he passed several times in the corridor, but to whom he had never spoken. "You're the Grey Lady?" She nodded, but she did not speak. "The ghost of Ravenclaw Tower?" "That is correct." Her tone was not encouraging. "Please, I need some help. I need to know anything you can tell me about the lost diadem." A cold smile curved her lips. "I am afraid," she said, turning to leave, "that I cannot help you." "Wait!" He had not meant to shout, but anger and panic were threatening to overwhelm him. He glanced at his watch as she hovered in front of him. It was 1:45. "This is urgent," he said fiercely. "If the diadem's at Hogwarts, I've got to find it fast." "You were hardly the first student to covet the diadem," she said disdainfully. "Generations of students have badgered me." "This isn't about trying to get better marks," Harry shouted at her. "It's about Voldemort, defeating Voldemort. Or aren't you interested in that?" She could not blush, but her transparent cheeks became more opaque and her voice was heated as she replied, "Of course how dare you suggest? Well, help me then." Her composure was slipping. It is not a question of," she stammered. "My mother's diadem." "Your mother's?" She looked angry with herself. "When I lived," she said stiffly, "I was Helena Ravenclaw. You're her daughter, but then you must know what happened to it." "While the diadem bestows wisdom," she said, with an obvious effort to pull herself together, "I doubt that it would greatly increase your chance of defeating the wizard who calls himself Lord." "Haven't I just told you I'm not interested in wearing it?" Harry said fiercely. "There's no time to explain, but if you care about Hogwarts, if you want to see Voldemort finished, you've got to tell me anything you know about the diadem." She remained quite still, floating in mid-air, staring down at home, and a sense of hopelessness engulfed Harry. Of course, if she had known anything, she would have told Flitwick or Dumbledore, who would surely ask her the same question. He had shaken his head and made to turn away, when she spoke in a low voice. "I stole the diadem from my mother." You did what?" "I stole the diadem," repeated Ravenclaw in a whisper. "I sought to make myself cleverer, more important than my mother. I ran away with it." He did not know how he managed to gain her confidence, and did not ask. He simply listened, held as she went on. "My mother, they say, never admitted that the diadem was gone. but pretended that she had it still. She concealed her loss, my dreadful betrayal, even from the other founders of Hogwarts. Then my mother fell ill, fatally ill. In spite of my perfidy, she was desperate to see me one more time. She sent a man who had long loved me, though I spurned his advances to find me. She knew that he would not rest until he had done so. Harry waited. She drew a deep breath and threw back her head. He tracked me to the forest where I was hiding. When I refused to return with him, he became violent. The Baron was always a hot-tempered man. Furious at my refusal, jealous of my freedom, he stabbed me. The Baron? You mean the bloody Baron? Yes, said the grey lady, and she lifted aside the cloak she wore to reveal a single dark wound in her white chest. When he saw what he had done, he was overcome with remorse. He took the weapon that had claimed my life and used it to kill himself. All these centuries later, he wears his chains as an act of penitence, as he should, she added bitterly. And the diadem? It remained where I had hidden it when I heard the Baron blundering through the forest towards me, concealed inside a hollow tree. A hollow tree? Repeated Harry. What tree? Where was this? A forest in Albania, an only place I would have thought was far beyond my mother's reach. Albania, repeated Harry, sense was emerging miraculously from confusion, and I understood why she was telling him what she had denied Dumbledore and Flitwick. You've already told someone this story, haven't you? Another student. She closed her eyes and nodded. I had no idea. He was flattering. He seemed to understand, to sympathise. Yes, Harry thought, Tom Riddle would certainly have understood Helena Ravenclaw's desire to possess fabulous objects to which she had little right. Well, you weren't the first person Riddle wound things out of, Harry muttered. He could be charming when he wanted. I'll finish there because it's really long and my camera doesn't let me do long films. Well, it does, but it takes absolutely forever to load. If this gets enough views, I might do another one, but maybe with a children's, well, this is a children's, but a younger children's book, as that'll be a lot shorter, and I could finish it then. As my auntie will have some children's books. Should do, hopefully. So I'm going to turn this off now. Bye.